Winning isn't about how hard you work, it's about how smart you play. If you're reading this, you already understand a critical truth. Predictable moves lose games. Whether in business, negotiations, or everyday competitive interactions, when your opponents can anticipate your next step, you're at a significant disadvantage. This book exists because there's a powerful solution: game theory. Game theory isn't just academic. It's a practical shortcut that anyone can learn to consistently outmaneuver the competition. As you explore these pages, you'll discover practical strategies you can start applying immediately. You'll learn how to keep your competitors guessing by incorporating structured unpredictability into your approach, making your moves impossible to anticipate without sacrificing execution quality. You'll quickly get the hang of identifying your rivals' weaknesses, accurately predicting how they'll respond, and using that information strategically. You'll also discover how minimax thinking can secure a reliable baseline outcome, allowing you to confidently pursue aggressive opportunities without fear of major losses. Furthermore, you'll understand how to establish stable, strategic arrangements that effortlessly maintain your advantage, leaving you more bandwidth to focus on growth. Finally, even in high-pressure situations filled with uncertainty, you'll be equipped with frameworks designed to help you make fast, confident, and strategically sound decisions every time. How to Win, the game theory shortcut to outsmart anyone, isn't about perfection. It's about systematic progress. You'll learn how to automate strategic thinking, freeing your mind for higher-level game design and more confident, profitable decision-making. The strategies you'll discover are intuitive, immediately actionable, and designed to produce measurable results. By mastering these principles, you'll not only compete smarter, you'll redefine how you win. Ready to play smarter and win consistently? Let's begin. Chapter 1. Win Faster. Your competitor just undercut your price by 20%. Again, they knew exactly where to hit because you've been playing the same moves for months. While you scramble to respond, they're already 3 steps ahead, having mapped your patterns like a chess grandmaster reading an amateur's playbook. This isn't about working harder or being smarter. This is about being unreadable while reading everyone else. Welcome to the game theory shortcut that turns predictable players into strategic ghosts and strategic ghosts into winners. The predictability tax. Every business owner pays an invisible tax, not to the government, but to rivals who've cracked their code. When you always respond to price pressure the same way, always negotiate from the same playbook, always time your moves predictably, you're broadcasting your next move to anyone paying attention. Take Sarah, a software consultant who lost 3 major deals in 2 months. Same pattern each time. She'd start high, get pushback, then immediately drop her price by 15%. Competitors learned her tell and started bidding exactly 16% below her opening offer. They knew she'd fold. She was paying the predictability tax, and it was bankrupting her competitive edge. The tax compounds. First, you lose margin. Then you lose time scrambling to counter moves you should have seen coming. Finally, you lose confidence, second-guessing every decision until paralysis replaces strategy. Your business becomes a reaction machine instead of a profit engine. But here's what most miss. The solution isn't to become random. Random is chaos. Random is slow. Random gets you fired. The solution is structured unpredictability, being deliberately unreadable while maintaining razor-sharp execution. The wrong game trap. Most strategic failures start with a labeling error. You think you're playing one game when you're actually playing another. Treat a negotiation like a zero-sum war when it's really about expanding the pie, and you'll torch relationships for pennies. Treat a genuine competition like a friendly collaboration, and you'll hand your edge to someone who knows better. Consider the SaaS founder who spent 6 months collaborating with a potential partner, sharing roadmaps, customer insights, and pricing strategies. He thought they were building something together. They were studying him. When they launched their competing product, it perfectly countered every advantage he'd revealed. He'd played cooperation while they played intelligence gathering. Game labeling isn't academic theory, it's survival. Get it wrong, and you're fighting the wrong battle with the wrong weapons. Get it right, and you choose your battlefield, your rules, your timing. The floor problem. Without a floor, you're gambling with your future. Every negotiation becomes a potential company killer. Every competitive move risks everything you've built. Fear creeps in, making you timid exactly when boldness would win. The floor isn't about pessimism, it's about freedom. When you know your absolute minimum acceptable outcome, you can press for maximum upside without risking catastrophic downside. You negotiate from strength, not desperation. You take intelligent risks because the worst case is survivable. Smart players install floors first, then build ceilings. They cap their losses before they chase their gains. This isn't defensive thinking, it's the foundation that makes aggressive offense possible. The strategic shortcut system. This book compresses decades of game theory research into 6 moves you can execute under pressure. No PhD required, no complex calculations in the heat of battle, just clear, repeatable shortcuts that work when stakes are high and time is short. First, you'll master zero-sum thinking, recognizing when someone's gain truly is your loss and playing those moments with cold precision. Then, mixed play makes you unreadable by adding structured randomness to your best moves. Risk guardrails. Install the floors that let you pursue upside with courage. Read minds teaches you to size up opponents in minutes, not months. Stable moves shows you how to design agreements that stick without constant policing. Learn fast builds a lightweight testing engine so you adapt faster than rivals. Finally, edge switch gives you the timing system to know when to protect and when to exploit. Each piece builds on the last: floors before aggression, unpredictability before exploitation, reading before striking. The sequence matters because it mirrors how winning actually works: safety first, then speed. Why this order wins? Most strategy advice gets the sequence backwards. It tells you to be aggressive without teaching you to be safe, to be unpredictable without showing you how to stay disciplined, to read opponents without giving you the tools to act on what you learn. This system follows the logic of compound advantage. Floors prevent catastrophic setbacks that erase months of progress. Mixed play removes the tells that let rivals counter your moves. Opponent modeling ensures your plays land where they'll do the most damage. Stability thinking reduces the friction that slows deals and partnerships. Learning loops ensure you get better while everyone else stays static. Mode switching lets you harvest gains when conditions are right and preserve capital when they're not. The result is a ratchet effect. Protect, exploit, bank gains, protect again, each cycle stronger than the last. The winner's mindset. Winners assume they're being watched, studied, and countered. They design unreadability into their operations from day one. They set floors not because they're pessimistic, but because floors unlock the confidence to press for maximum upside. Winners measure everything and adapt fast. They switch between defensive and offensive modes based on data, not emotion. They treat each interaction as a learning opportunity that compounds into long-term advantage. Losers do the opposite. They confuse luck with skill, defending their egos instead of improving their outcomes. They overreact to noise while missing the signals that matter. They pick one mode, usually defensive, and stick with it regardless of circumstances, then blame external forces when results disappoint. The difference isn't intelligence or resources, it's system. Winners have a repeatable process for making strategic decisions under uncertainty. Losers wing it and hope for the best. Your first move. You don't need to master everything at once. Pick one live situation, a negotiation, a competitive bid, a partnership discussion. Map the basic game. Who are the players? What moves are available? What does each side really want? Set a floor. What's your minimum acceptable outcome? Write it down. Make it non-negotiable. This single act will change how you show up to every conversation. Then add one element of unpredictability. If you always start negotiations at a certain price point, vary it by 10 to 15%. If you always respond to emails within an hour, sometimes wait 3 hours. Small changes that break your patterns and force opponents to recalibrate. The goal isn't perfection, it's progress. Each small improvement compounds. Each pattern you break makes you harder to read. Each floor you install makes you bolder in pursuit of upside. But this is just the foundation. The real power comes when you understand not just how to be unpredictable, but when unpredictability becomes your greatest weapon. In the next chapter, we'll explore the stark reality of zero-sum games, where your gain truly is their loss, and mercy is just another word for defeat. Before we continue, make sure to subscribe to Grow to the Top and activate notifications to receive more self-improvement tips that will supercharge your growth. And make sure to give this video a thumbs up and share it with your friends. It really helps the channel grow. Thank you for your support. Chapter 2: Zero Sum. The bidding war was brutal. Two tech companies fighting for the same enterprise client, each knowing that winning meant everything and losing meant watching a competitor pocket millions in recurring revenue. No shared victory, no splitting the prize. Pure mathematical cruelty. Your gain equals my loss, down to the last dollar. Most business owners think they understand competition. They don't. They confuse drama with strategy, emotion with analysis. They treat every negotiation like a death match, or every conflict like a friendly disagreement. Both approaches lose money. The winners, they know exactly when they're in a true zero-sum game, and they play it with surgical precision. This chapter isn't about becoming ruthless, it's about becoming accurate. Because in genuine zero-sum situations, mercy isn't virtue, it's strategic suicide. The mislabeling epidemic. Walk into any business conference and listen to the war stories. We crushed the competition. It was us or them. Winner takes all. Most of these stories are fiction. The storytellers are confusing zero-sum games with regular business competition, and the confusion is expensive. True zero-sum games are rarer than most think. When Microsoft and Apple compete for market share, both can grow if the overall market expands. When two consultants bid for the same project, only one can win, but the loser can find other projects. When two companies negotiate a partnership, they can structure deals that benefit both sides. But sometimes the math is unforgiving. Patent litigation where only one side can own the intellectual property. Acquisition battles where only one buyer can purchase the target. Territory disputes where geographic exclusivity means your expansion blocks mine completely. Regulatory slots where agencies issue limited licenses. These are zero-sum games, and they demand zero-sum thinking. The cost of mislabeling runs both ways. Treat a collaborative opportunity like a zero-sum war, and you'll destroy value for everyone involved. You'll negotiate aggressively when you should be problem-solving creatively. You'll compete when you should be cooperating. You'll fight over a small pie instead of working together to bake a bigger one. But the opposite error is worse. Treat a genuine zero-sum contest like a friendly collaboration, and you'll hand your advantage to someone who knows better. You'll make concessions expecting reciprocity that never comes. You'll share information that gets weaponized against you. You'll play nice while your opponent plays to win. The difference between winners and losers often comes down to accurate game identification. Winners spend 30 seconds asking, is this truly zero-sum, or am I missing opportunities to expand value? That question alone prevents most strategic disasters. The minimax foundation. Once you've confirmed you're in a genuine zero-sum situation, emotion becomes your enemy. Fear makes you concede too much. Greed makes you overreach and lose everything. Anger makes you fight battles you can't win. The antidote is mathematical clarity, minimax thinking. Minimax sounds academic, but it's brutally practical. You map out your possible moves and their worst-case outcomes. Then you choose the move with the highest worst-case payoff. You're not optimizing for the best possible result. You're ensuring you can survive the worst possible response. Consider a pricing war between two software companies. Company A can cut prices by 10%, 20%, or 30%. Company B will respond, and the final outcome depends on both moves. Company A's minimax analysis might reveal that a 20% cut guarantees at least 15% market share regardless of B's response, while a 30% cut could result in either 25% share or complete price collapse. The minimax choice is clear: 20% cut, 15% guaranteed share. This isn't pessimism, it's insurance. By securing your floor first, you create the psychological safety to press for upside later. You negotiate from calm confidence instead of desperate hope. Your opponents sense this stability and often concede earlier rather than test your resolve. The minimax floor also prevents the most common zero-sum mistake, last-minute panic concessions. When you know your absolute minimum acceptable outcome, you can't be squeezed below it. You'll walk away first, and smart opponents know this. They stop trying to extract that final 5% because they know it's not available. The clarity advantage. Zero-sum games reward simplicity. Complex negotiations with dozens of variables hide traps and create confusion. Smart players shrink the game to its essential elements: 2 or 3 key moves per side, clear payoffs, obvious timing. This simplification isn't dumbing down, it's strategic focus. When Coca-Cola and Pepsi compete for shelf space in a grocery store, they don't negotiate complex multivariable deals. They focus on the core trade: price per unit, promotional support, and shelf positioning. The simpler the game, the clearer the optimal moves. Building a compact payoff matrix forces clarity. You list your top moves, estimate their outcomes against likely responses, and identify which strategies are dominated by others. If move A always performs worse than move B, regardless of what your opponent does, you delete move A. The remaining options become your strategic menu. This process reveals hidden weaknesses in your position. Maybe your aggressive strategy only works if your opponent makes a specific mistake. Maybe your safe strategy isn't actually safe if market conditions shift. Maybe you have fewer viable options than you thought, which means you need to change the game entirely or find a different battlefield. The matrix also exposes your opponent's constraints. If they have only 2 viable responses to your moves, you can predict their behavior with high confidence. If they have many options, you need to gather more intelligence before committing to a strategy. The execution protocol. Knowing the right move is worthless if you can't execute it cleanly. Zero-sum games punish hesitation, confusion, and mixed signals. You need a script that communicates your position without revealing your full strategy. The script starts with your floor, not your plan. "We need at least X to make this work" is clear and credible. "We're thinking about X, but we might consider Y if you do Z" is weak and exploitable. State your minimum requirements early and stick to them. Let your opponent figure out how to meet them. Timing matters enormously. Early commitment to floors prevents desperate, last-minute concessions. Late commitment looks like bluffing and invites testing. The sweet spot is early enough to be credible, late enough to have gathered useful intelligence about your opponent's position and constraints. Silence becomes a weapon. Most people are uncomfortable with quiet moments in negotiations and fill them with unnecessary concessions or information. Let your opponent talk first after you state your position. They'll often reveal their real constraints, their backup plans, or their decision-making timeline. This intelligence shapes your next moves. Keep relationship talk separate from numeric floors. "I really enjoy working with you, and I hope we can find a way to make this work, but we need at least 25% margin to proceed," is clear and professional. Mixing personal warmth with business requirements confuses the message and creates false hope about flexibility that doesn't exist. The common traps. The biggest trap is believing that zero-sum games require relentless aggression. They don't. They require disciplined defense followed by opportunistic offense. Secure your floor first, then probe for weaknesses in your opponent's position. Attack when you spot an opening, not because you're feeling aggressive. Another trap is data obsession. More information feels safer, but it often creates paralysis. A clean model with rough numbers beats a complex model with precise data. You're not trying to predict the future perfectly, you're trying to make good decisions under uncertainty. 3 scenarios with clear implications beat 30 scenarios with muddled takeaways. The clever trick trap catches many smart players. They assume there's always a creative solution that benefits everyone, even in zero-sum situations. Sometimes there isn't. Sometimes one side wins and the other loses, and the only question is which side you'll be on. Accepting this reality early prevents wasted time searching for win-win solutions that don't exist. The reputation effect. Play zero-sum games well consistently, and something interesting happens. Your reputation changes. Opponents stop testing your floors because they know you'll defend them. Negotiations become shorter and cleaner because everyone knows you've done the math and won't be moved by emotional appeals or last-minute pressure. This reputation is valuable beyond individual deals. It deters predatory behavior from competitors who might otherwise probe for weaknesses. It attracts partners who prefer dealing with predictable, rational players. It builds trust with your team because they know you won't sacrifice long-term position for short-term peace. The reputation effect compounds over time. Each well-played zero-sum game strengthens your position in future games. Opponents start with more realistic expectations. They make better initial offers because they know you won't accept bad ones. They focus on finding mutually acceptable solutions instead of trying to extract maximum concessions. But reputation cuts both ways. Play zero-sum games poorly, make threats you don't follow through on, accept deals below your stated minimums, or confuse aggression with strategy, and you'll be tagged as exploitable. Smart opponents will test you more frequently and push harder for concessions they know you'll eventually make. Beyond the matrix. Mastering zero-sum thinking is just the foundation. It teaches you to think clearly under pressure, set non-negotiable floors, and execute with discipline. But most business situations aren't purely zero-sum, and playing them as if they were leaves money on the table. The real power comes from knowing when to apply zero-sum thinking and when to shift to other modes, when to defend your position with mathematical precision, and when to explore creative alternatives, when to simplify the game, and when to add complexity that favors your strengths. This decision, when to play zero-sum and when to play differently, separates good strategists from great ones. It requires reading not just the game structure, but the minds playing it. And that's where the next chapter takes us, into territory where predictability becomes your deadliest enemy and structured chaos becomes your greatest weapon. Chapter 3, Mixed Play. The poker player sat perfectly still, face blank as stone. For 3 hours, he'd been impossible to read. No tells, no patterns, no exploitable habits. His opponents grew frustrated, making increasingly desperate bets against someone who seemed to operate by pure chance. But chance had nothing to do with it. Every move was calculated, every decision pre-planned. He wasn't random, he was systematically unreadable. This is the power of mixed play. Not chaos, but structured unpredictability. Not confusion, but disciplined ambiguity. The difference between winners and losers often comes down to a simple truth. If they can read you, they can beat you. Most business owners are open books. They negotiate the same way every time. They respond to pressure with identical patterns. They time their moves like clockwork. Smart competitors study these patterns, then exploit them ruthlessly. The solution isn't to become erratic. It's to become strategically unpredictable. The predictability tax. Every predictable habit you have costs you money. When you always start negotiations at 20% above your target price, competitors learn to anchor 25% below it. When you always respond to email within an hour, people know they can pressure you with artificial urgency. When you always make concessions on Friday afternoons, rivals time their demands accordingly. This predictability tax compounds over time. First, you lose margin as opponents counter your moves before you make them. Then you lose time as negotiations drag on while competitors probe for patterns. Finally, you lose respect as your reputation shifts from strategic to predictable. The tax shows up everywhere. In vendor negotiations, where suppliers know exactly how much pressure triggers your concessions. In hiring, where candidates recognize your standard offer patterns and negotiate accordingly. In partnerships, where allies know which buttons to push to get favorable terms. In competitive situations, where rivals can predict your responses and position accordingly. But here's what most miss. The solution isn't to become random. Random is slow, random is sloppy, random gets you fired. The solution is structured unpredictability, being deliberately unreadable while maintaining razor-sharp execution speed. Mixed play deletes the predictability tax by making your patterns unlearnable. Opponents waste time trying to decode strategies that change by design. They prepare for counters that may never come. They hesitate when they should act decisively because they can't predict your response. The architecture of ambiguity. True mixed play isn't about flipping coins or making random choices. It's about building a small, disciplined system that generates unpredictability without sacrificing quality. You start with your best moves, the 2 or 3 strategies that consistently deliver results. Then you assign each move a specific frequency based on mathematical principles, not gut feelings. The key insight is the indifference principle. You want to mix your strategies in proportions that make your opponent indifferent among their best responses. If they can't gain an advantage by choosing any particular counter strategy, they can't exploit your patterns. You've achieved strategic equilibrium through controlled randomness. Consider a software company that faces 3 types of competitive responses when launching new features: direct copying, feature bundling, or price cuts. Instead of always responding the same way, they might use a mixed strategy: 50% rapid iteration to stay ahead of copiers, 30% strategic partnerships to counter bundling, 20% value messaging to neutralize price competition. The exact percentages matter less than the principle. No single response dominates their strategy. This approach requires discipline most players lack. It means sometimes choosing the second best option because the mix demands it. It means resisting the urge to always play your favorite move. It means accepting short-term sub-optimization for long-term strategic advantage. The payoff is enormous. Competitors can't prepare specific counters because they don't know which version of you they'll face. They waste resources building defenses against moves you might not make. They second-guess their own strategies because yours keeps shifting in unpredictable ways. The execution engine. Building a mixed strategy is worthless if you can't execute it cleanly under pressure. Most people fail at mixed play because they try to make decisions in real time, introducing hesitation, bias, and tells. The solution is pre-commitment. Decide your moves before you need them. The mechanics are simpler than most imagine. You create a small menu of viable options, assign each a probability weight, then use a predetermined randomization method to select among them. The randomization happens before the meeting, before the negotiation, before the pressure builds. When the moment comes, you execute the pre-selected strategy with full commitment. This pre-commitment serves multiple purposes. It removes decision paralysis from high-stakes moments. It prevents emotional reactions from overriding strategic logic. It eliminates the microtells that leak information about your internal decision process. Most importantly, it ensures you actually follow through on the mixed strategy instead of defaulting to your comfort zone. The randomization method matters less than consistency. Some players use dice, others use predetermined sequences, others use the last digit of stock prices. The key is choosing a method you can execute quickly and privately without drawing attention to the process. The goal is to appear decisive while actually following a predetermined script. Tracking becomes crucial. You need to monitor which strategies you're actually using versus your intended mix. Most players drift toward their preferred moves without realizing it, undermining the entire system. Weekly reviews catch these deviations early and allow for course corrections. The intelligence advantage. Mixed play creates a powerful information asymmetry. While your opponents struggle to decode your patterns, you're gathering intelligence about theirs. Every interaction becomes a learning opportunity because you're not locked into predictable responses. When you vary your negotiation style, you discover which approaches work best with different personality types. When you mix your timing, you learn when opponents are most vulnerable to pressure. When you alternate between aggressive and collaborative stances, you map their comfort zones and trigger points. This intelligence compounds over time. You build detailed profiles of key competitors, partners, and stakeholders. You identify their patterns while obscuring your own. You develop situational playbooks that account for their likely responses to your various strategies. The intelligence advantage extends beyond individual relationships. Mixed play reveals market dynamics that consistent strategies miss. You discover which competitive moves trigger industry-wide responses versus isolated reactions. You identify timing windows when certain strategies work better than others. You uncover hidden alliances and coordination among competitors. Smart players use this intelligence to refine their mixes continuously. They increase the frequency of strategies that consistently outperform. They eliminate moves that repeatedly underdeliver. They adjust their randomization to exploit newly discovered opponent biases. The discipline challenge. The hardest part of mixed play isn't the mathematics, it's the psychology. Human nature craves consistency, predictability, and the comfort of proven approaches. Mixed play demands you occasionally choose strategies that feel suboptimal in the moment for the sake of long-term strategic advantage. This creates internal resistance. Your team questions why you're not always using the best approach. Your instincts rebel against strategies that feel awkward or unfamiliar. Your ego wants to stick with moves that have worked before. Overcoming this resistance requires understanding why the discipline matters. Mixed play is insurance against strategic obsolescence. Markets change, competitors adapt, and yesterday's winning moves become tomorrow's losing habits. By maintaining multiple viable strategies, you stay flexible as conditions shift. You avoid the trap of over-optimizing for current conditions that may not persist. The discipline also builds strategic muscle. Each time you execute a mixed strategy successfully, you expand your comfort zone. You develop confidence in a broader range of approaches. You become genuinely unpredictable instead of just trying to appear that way. Most importantly, the discipline compounds. Each successful mixed play cycle makes the next one easier. Your team learns to trust the process. Your opponents learn to expect the unexpected. Your reputation shifts from predictable to sophisticated. The measurement framework. Mixed play without measurement is just expensive randomness. You need clear metrics to determine whether your unpredictability is creating value or just creating confusion. The key metrics focus on opponent behavior rather than your own performance. Watch for changes in how competitors approach you. Do they take longer to respond to your moves? Do they hedge their bets instead of making confident counterplays? Do they ask more questions before committing to strategies? These behavioral shifts indicate your mixed play is working. Track negotiation dynamics. Are opponents making earlier concessions because they can't predict your flexibility? Are they offering better initial terms because they can't game your response patterns? Are they spending more time preparing for interactions because they can't rely on historical precedent? Monitor competitive intelligence gathering. Are rivals asking more questions about your strategy? Are they probing for patterns more aggressively? Are they making mistakes because they're preparing for the wrong version of your approach? Increased intelligence activity often signals that your unpredictability is creating uncertainty. The ultimate measure is strategic freedom. Mixed play should expand your options, not constrain them. You should feel more confident taking risks because opponents can't predict and counter them. You should find new opportunities because you're not locked into historical patterns. The evolution imperative. Mixed play isn't a set-it-and-forget-it system. It requires continuous evolution as opponents adapt and market conditions change. Static mixes become predictable over time, defeating the entire purpose. Smart players treat their mixed strategies as living systems that grow more sophisticated with experience. The evolution happens at multiple levels. You refine individual strategies based on performance data. You adjust mixing weights as opponent behaviors change. You add new strategies as market opportunities emerge. You eliminate strategies that become obsolete or exploitable. This evolution requires staying ahead of your own patterns. Just as you work to avoid predictability in your strategic choices, you must avoid predictability in how you update your mixed strategies. The timing, criteria, and methods for evolution should themselves be somewhat unpredictable. The goal isn't perfect randomness, it's strategic unpredictability that serves your objectives. You want opponents to find you unreadable without becoming unreadable to yourself. You want to maintain the benefits of systematic thinking while eliminating the vulnerabilities of systematic behavior. But even the most sophisticated mixed play has limits. There are situations where unpredictability becomes a liability, where clear signals matter more than strategic ambiguity. Knowing when to abandon mixed play for other approaches, when to shift from chaos to clarity, requires understanding not just the game you're playing, but the invisible barriers that determine whether any strategy can succeed at all. Chapter 4. Risk Guardrails. The venture capitalist had seen it 1,000 times. Brilliant entrepreneurs with game-changing ideas, perfect market timing, and flawless execution, right up until the moment they bet everything on a single outcome. One bad quarter, one key customer loss, one market shift, and years of progress vanished overnight. The difference between the survivors and the casualties wasn't talent or luck. It was guardrails. Most business owners think guardrails slow them down. They're wrong. Guardrails are what make speed possible. When you know your absolute floor, the worst outcome you can survive, you can press for maximum upside without risking catastrophic downside. You can be aggressive because you've made ruin impossible. This chapter isn't about playing it safe, it's about playing it smart, because the boldest moves come from the most secure foundations. The freedom paradox. Here's what separates winners from wannabes. Winners install floors first, then build ceilings. They cap their downside before they chase their upside. They make failure survivable so they can pursue success aggressively. This isn't defensive thinking, it's the foundation that makes offensive thinking possible. Without guardrails, every decision becomes existential. Every negotiation carries the risk of company-ending losses. Every competitive move could trigger a death spiral. Fear creeps in, making you timid exactly when boldness would win. You start playing not to lose instead of playing to win, and that shift in mindset is often the beginning of the end. But install proper guardrails, and something magical happens. Confidence replaces fear. Speed replaces hesitation. You negotiate from strength because you know your walkaway point. You take intelligent risks because the worst case is survivable. You press advantages because you've protected against disadvantages. The paradox is real. The more secure your foundation, the more aggressive you can be in building on it. The clearer your minimum acceptable outcome, the harder you can push for maximum possible outcome. The better your insurance against failure, the bolder your pursuit of success. This principle shows up everywhere in high-performance environments. Professional traders use stop losses to limit downside so they can size up winning positions. Military strategists secure supply lines before launching offensives. Championship athletes master fundamentals so they can attempt spectacular plays. The pattern is universal. Floors first, then freedom. The uncertainty engine. The business world runs on uncertainty. Markets shift without warning. Competitors make unexpected moves. Customers change preferences overnight. Regulations appear from nowhere. Technology disrupts entire industries in months. The only certainty is that your models are wrong, your assumptions are incomplete, and your predictions will miss the mark. Most strategic planning pretends otherwise. Teams build detailed forecasts with false precision, creating elaborate scenarios based on point estimates that have zero chance of being accurate. They optimize for specific outcomes that won't happen, leaving themselves vulnerable to everything that will. Smart players think differently. They assume their models are wrong and design strategies that work anyway. They use ranges instead of point estimates. They stress test assumptions with extreme scenarios. They build robustness into their choices so they perform acceptably across multiple possible futures. This robust thinking shows up in 3 powerful guardrails. The first is minimax security. For every possible move, you calculate the worst-case outcome, then choose the move with the highest worst-case payoff. You're not optimizing for the best possible result. You're ensuring you can survive the worst possible response. The second is minimax regret. You imagine looking back from the future and asking which choice would hurt least if you were wrong. This guards against the pain of missed opportunities, not just direct losses. Sometimes the biggest risk is being too conservative when aggression would have paid off. The third is distributional robustness. Your strategy works acceptably well across a range of plausible scenarios, not just your best guess about what will happen. You're not trying to predict the future perfectly, you're trying to thrive regardless of which future actually arrives. The security calculation. Building effective guardrails starts with brutal honesty about worst-case scenarios. Most business owners are terrible at this. They either ignore downside risks entirely or get paralyzed by imagining catastrophes that will never happen. The key is finding the sweet spot, realistic worst cases that are bad enough to matter but probable enough to plan for. The calculation is simpler than most imagine. For each strategic option you're considering, you map out what happens if everything goes wrong. Not apocalyptically wrong, realistically wrong. The key customer doesn't renew. The product launch fails. The partnership falls through. The market shifts against you. Then you ask, can you survive this outcome and continue operating? If the answer is no, you either redesign the strategy or abandon it entirely. No upside is worth risking the entire enterprise. If the answer is yes, you've identified your security level, the minimum acceptable outcome that keeps you in the game. This becomes your non-negotiable floor. The security level serves multiple purposes. It prevents panic decisions when things go badly. It provides clear criteria for when to cut losses and move on. It creates psychological safety that enables bold action in other areas. Most importantly, it forces you to think through failure modes before they happen, when you can still do something about them. This process reveals hidden vulnerabilities in seemingly safe strategies. Maybe your conservative approach actually depends on 3 different assumptions, all being true simultaneously. Maybe your diversified portfolio is actually concentrated in ways you hadn't noticed. Maybe your low-risk strategy is only low risk if market conditions don't change. The regret framework. Security levels protect against direct losses, but they miss a subtler danger, the pain of paths not taken. Sometimes the biggest risk isn't losing what you have, it's missing what you could have gained. This is where regret analysis becomes crucial. Regret analysis forces you to think about opportunity costs, not just direct costs. You imagine 3 or 4 plausible scenarios for how the future might unfold, then calculate how much you'd regret each possible choice in each scenario. The goal isn't to eliminate regret, that's impossible, but to minimize the maximum regret across all scenarios. This approach catches strategies that look safe but are actually dangerous. The conservative choice that protects against downside but caps upside might generate enormous regret if the market takes off. The aggressive choice that maximizes upside but ignores downside might generate enormous regret if the market crashes. The regret-minimizing choice often sits between these extremes. Regret analysis also reveals the hidden costs of indecision. Waiting for more information feels safe, but it often generates more regret than making an imperfect decision quickly. Markets don't wait for you to achieve certainty. Competitors don't pause while you gather more data. Sometimes the biggest regret comes from being too careful when speed would have won. The framework works because it matches how humans actually experience outcomes. We don't just care about absolute results. We care about results relative to what we could have achieved. A 10% gain feels terrible if you could have made 50%. A 10% loss feels acceptable if you could have lost 50%. Regret analysis captures this psychological reality and builds it into strategic planning. The stress test protocol. Guardrails are only as strong as their weakest assumptions. Most risk management fails because it optimizes for normal conditions while ignoring extreme events. Markets crash, pandemics happen, key employees quit, major customers disappear, regulations change overnight. Your guardrails need to work when everything goes wrong simultaneously. The stress test protocol is simple but brutal. You take your carefully calculated worst-case scenarios and make them worse. You assume multiple bad things happen at once. You imagine your key assumptions are not just wrong, but dramatically wrong. You ask, does your strategy still work? Can you still survive? Do your guardrails hold? If the answer is no, you have three options. Redesign the strategy to be more robust. Add additional guardrails to handle extreme scenarios. Or accept the risk consciously, knowing that you're betting the company on your assumptions being roughly correct. All three are valid choices, but only if you make them deliberately. The stress test often reveals hidden correlations that normal analysis misses. Your revenue and costs might both depend on the same economic factors. Your key customers might all be in the same industry. Your backup plans might all require the same resources. When the stress hits, these correlations turn diversification into concentration and safety into danger. Smart players build redundancy into their guardrails. They don't rely on single points of failure. They create multiple backup plans that work under different conditions. They maintain reserves that can handle multiple simultaneous shocks. They design strategies that degrade gracefully under pressure instead of collapsing catastrophically. The dashboard discipline. Guardrails are worthless if you don't monitor them continuously. Most risk management systems fail because they're too complex to track in real time. By the time you realize you've breached a guardrail, it's too late to do anything about it. The solution is radical simplification. A one-page dashboard that shows your key metrics at a glance. The dashboard tracks three things: your current position relative to your security level, early warning indicators that suggest trouble ahead, and trigger points that demand immediate action. You check it weekly, not daily, frequent enough to catch problems early, not so frequent that you overreact to noise. The security level tracking is straightforward. You know your minimum acceptable cash flow, market share, customer concentration, or whatever metric matters most to your survival. You track where you are relative to that floor and how quickly you're moving toward or away from it. This gives you early warning when you need to shift from offense to defense. The early warning indicators are more subtle. They're the leading indicators that suggest your security level might be at risk in the future. Customer satisfaction scores dropping, competitor activity increasing, market conditions shifting, key employee engagement declining. These don't trigger immediate action, but they put you on alert. The trigger points are non-negotiable. When you hit them, you stop everything else and focus on getting back above your security level. 3 consecutive months of declining revenue, customer concentration above 40%, cash reserves below 6 months of expenses. Whatever your triggers are, you define them in advance and commit to acting when they're breached. The offensive dividend. Here's the payoff for all this defensive thinking. It makes offense possible. When you know your floors are secure, you can press for ceilings aggressively. When you've capped your downside, you can chase unlimited upside. When you've made failure survivable, you can pursue success boldly. The offensive dividend shows up in multiple ways. You negotiate harder because you know your walkaway point. You take bigger risks because you've limited the consequences. You move faster because you don't need to analyze every decision to death. You think bigger because small thinking won't threaten your survival. Teams respond differently when they know the company won't die from a single mistake. They take more initiative. They propose bolder ideas. They execute with more confidence. They recover from setbacks faster because setbacks aren't existential threats. The psychological safety created by good guardrails unleashes creativity and performance. Competitors notice the change too. They can't pressure you with threats that don't threaten your survival. They can't exploit desperation because you're not desperate. They can't force bad deals because you have good alternatives. Your reputation shifts from needs the deal to chooses the deal, and that shift changes every negotiation in your favor. But guardrails are just the foundation. The real art lies in reading the people across the table, understanding not just the game you're playing, but the minds playing it, because the most sophisticated risk management in the world won't save you if you're solving for the wrong opponent entirely. Chapter 5. Read Minds. The negotiation was going nowhere. 2 hours in, and the other side kept making offers that made no economic sense. They'd reject proposals that clearly benefited them, then counter with terms that hurt both parties. The seasoned dealmaker across the table was baffled until he stopped analyzing the numbers and started analyzing the person. Within 10 minutes, everything clicked. This wasn't about money, it was about control. The decision maker needed to feel like they'd won something, even if winning cost them profit. Once he understood the real game being played, the deal closed in 20 minutes. Most strategic failures happen because we're solving for the wrong opponent. We build perfect strategies for rational actors, then wonder why they fail against actual humans. We optimize for logical responses, then get blindsided by emotional ones. We prepare for the game we want to play instead of the game they're actually playing. This chapter isn't about manipulation or psychological tricks. It's about accuracy. Because the most brilliant strategy in the world is worthless if it's designed for someone who doesn't exist. The sophistication spectrum. Every person you deal with operates at a different level of strategic thinking. Some react purely to immediate stimuli. What's happening right now? What feels good today? What solves the most pressing problem? Others think one step ahead, anticipating your likely response to their moves. The most sophisticated think multiple steps ahead, modeling not just your response, but your response to their response. Understanding this spectrum is crucial because the same strategy that dominates a simple thinker will fail catastrophically against a sophisticated one. The aggressive opening that intimidates a reactive player will trigger a devastating counter from someone who's thought 3 moves ahead. The subtle misdirection that confuses an average opponent will be transparent to an expert. Most business owners make one of 2 mistakes. They either assume everyone thinks like they do, or they assume everyone thinks at the same level they do. Both assumptions are expensive. Overestimate your opponent's sophistication, and you'll overcomplicate simple situations. Underestimate it, and you'll walk into traps you should have seen coming. The key insight is that strategic sophistication isn't about intelligence, it's about depth of reasoning in competitive situations. A brilliant engineer might be a level 0 negotiator. An average IQ salesperson might think 5 moves ahead in deal structures. Academic credentials don't predict strategic depth, and strategic depth doesn't predict academic credentials. This creates opportunities for those who can read the levels accurately. You can outmaneuver sophisticated opponents by being unpredictable. You can outthink simple opponents by being systematic. You can avoid wasting energy on elaborate strategies when simple ones will work. Most importantly, you can tailor your approach to the mind across the table instead of hoping one size fits all. The signal detection system. Reading strategic levels isn't about lengthy psychological assessments or complex personality tests. It's about watching a few key behaviors that reveal thinking depth quickly and reliably. The signals are subtle but consistent once you know what to look for. Timing tells you everything. Level 0 players respond immediately to whatever just happened. They react to your last move without considering what your next move might be. They make decisions based on current information without thinking about what information their decision reveals to you. They're playing checkers while you're playing chess. Level 1 players pause before responding. They're thinking about your likely reaction to their move, but they're not thinking about your reaction to their reaction. They'll anticipate your immediate counter, but miss your deeper strategy. They're playing chess, but only thinking 1 move ahead. Level 2 players think in sequences. They consider not just your immediate response, but the chain of moves that follows. They ask themselves what you're trying to achieve and how their response fits into your larger plan. They're playing chess and thinking several moves ahead. Level 3 players think about thinking. They model not just what you'll do, but how you'll decide what to do. They consider your information, your constraints, your biases, and your decision-making process. They're playing chess while also analyzing your chess-playing style. The beautiful thing about this system is that it's self-revealing. You don't need to guess someone's level. You can test it with small, safe probes. Make a move that has different optimal responses depending on thinking depth, then watch what they do. Their response tells you exactly how many steps ahead they're thinking. The motivation map. Strategic level tells you how someone thinks, but it doesn't tell you what they want. Two people at the same sophistication level might pursue completely different objectives. One might optimize for profit, another for status, another for speed, another for control. Understanding these underlying motivations is often more important than understanding thinking depth. The challenge is that people rarely tell you their real objectives directly. They might not even know them themselves. They'll say they want the best deal when they actually want to feel respected. They'll claim they're optimizing for price when they're actually optimizing for simplicity. They'll insist they need speed when they actually need certainty. This is where inverse reasoning becomes powerful. Instead of asking what someone wants, you observe what they do and work backwards to infer what they must want for those actions to make sense. If someone consistently chooses higher-priced options with better service, they're probably optimizing for quality or status, not cost. If they always negotiate aggressively on small points while conceding on large ones, they're probably optimizing for the feeling of winning, not the economics of winning. The key is looking for patterns across multiple decisions, not reading too much into single choices. One data point is an anecdote. 3 data points start to reveal preferences. 5 data points usually give you a reliable read on someone's core motivations. Once you understand what someone really wants, you can structure offers that give them what they value most while getting what you need. The person who values status gets prestigious terms. The person who values simplicity gets streamlined processes. The person who values control gets decision-making authority. Everyone wins because everyone gets what they actually care about. The adaptation test. Reading someone's initial level and motivation is just the beginning. The real question is how quickly they adapt when they realize you're not playing the game they expected. Some people stick to their original strategy regardless of new information. Others adjust rapidly when they detect changes in the competitive landscape. Adaptation speed matters enormously for strategy selection. Against slow adapters, you can use the same successful approach repeatedly. Against fast adapters, you need to vary your tactics constantly to stay ahead of their adjustments. Against very fast adapters, you might need to use their adaptation speed against them by making them overreact to false signals. Testing adaptation speed requires patience and subtlety. You make a small change to your usual approach and watch how long it takes them to notice and adjust. Do they respond immediately, suggesting high awareness and fast processing? Do they respond after several iterations, suggesting they're tracking patterns but slowly? Do they never respond, suggesting they're locked into their original strategy? The test also reveals something crucial about their information processing. Fast adapters are usually gathering intelligence actively and updating their models continuously. Slow adapters are usually operating from fixed assumptions and ignoring contradictory evidence. Non-adapters are usually following scripts or rules that don't allow for strategic flexibility. This intelligence shapes your entire approach. Against fast adapters, you need to be unpredictable and keep your real strategy hidden. Against slow adapters, you can be more systematic and exploit their rigidity. Against non-adapters, you can often predict their moves with high confidence and plan accordingly. The calibration challenge. The biggest trap in reading people is projection, assuming others think like you do. High-level strategic thinkers consistently overestimate the sophistication of their opponents. Simple thinkers consistently underestimate it. Both biases are expensive, but in different ways. Overestimating sophistication leads to overthinking simple situations. You build elaborate strategies to counter moves that will never come. You look for hidden meanings in straightforward communications. You waste time and energy preparing for complexity that doesn't exist. You miss obvious opportunities because you're looking for subtle ones. Underestimating sophistication leads to walking into obvious traps. You use strategies that work against simple opponents but fail against sophisticated ones. You reveal information carelessly because you don't think anyone is paying attention. You make moves that seem clever but are actually transparent to anyone thinking ahead. The solution is systematic calibration. You start with a neutral assumption about someone's level, then adjust based on evidence. You look for multiple independent signals before making strong conclusions. You test your reads with small, reversible moves before committing to major strategies based on them. Most importantly, you update your assessment continuously as new information arrives. People can operate at different levels in different contexts. Someone might be sophisticated about technology, but naive about finance. Someone might be strategic in their core business, but reactive in adjacent areas. Someone might be sharp when they're prepared, but sloppy when they're rushed. The execution engine. Reading people accurately is worthless if you can't act on the intelligence quickly and cleanly. The goal isn't to build perfect psychological profiles, it's to make better strategic decisions in real time. This requires a simple system that translates reads into actions without overthinking. For level 0 opponents, you use simple, high-value strategies. You don't need elaborate misdirection or complex sequences. You make straightforward offers that clearly benefit both parties. You avoid anything that requires them to think multiple steps ahead. You focus on immediate, tangible value rather than long-term strategic positioning. For level 1 opponents, you add one layer of indirection. You make moves that look good on the surface but set up better moves later. You use their tendency to think one step ahead against them by making your second move more valuable than your first. You give them something to react to while keeping your real objective hidden. For level 2 and level 3 opponents, you shift to the mixed strategies and unpredictability tools from earlier chapters. You can't rely on simple patterns because they'll detect and counter them. You need to vary your approach, hide your tells, and make your strategy unreadable. You're playing against someone who's actively trying to figure you out. The key is matching your complexity to their sophistication. Too simple against a sophisticated opponent, and you'll be transparent. Too complex against a simple opponent, and you'll confuse yourself more than them. The right level of strategic complexity is just above their ability to counter it effectively. The intelligence advantage. Master the art of reading people quickly and accurately, and you gain a massive advantage in every interaction. You waste less time on strategies that won't work. You avoid traps you would have walked into blindly. You find opportunities others miss because they're solving for the wrong opponent. The advantage compounds over time. Each accurate read improves your calibration for future reads. Each successful strategy tailored to a specific opponent type becomes a reusable template. Each avoided mistake prevents the reputation damage that makes future interactions more difficult. Your reputation evolves too. People start describing you as someone who gets it quickly, who understands what they really need, who doesn't waste time on irrelevant complications. This reputation makes everything easier. Negotiations start from better positions, partnerships form more naturally, conflicts resolve more smoothly. But reading minds is still just preparation. The real art lies in knowing what to do with that intelligence, how to create situations where everyone gets what they want, where conflicts resolve themselves, and where temporary agreements become permanent advantages. That's where the next chapter takes us, into the realm where psychology meets mathematics and temporary tactics become lasting solutions. Chapter 6: Stable Moves. The partnership had been renegotiated 4 times in 18 months. Every quarter brought new disputes, revised terms, and emergency meetings to fix what kept breaking. Both companies were profitable, the market was growing, and the collaboration made strategic sense. Yet they couldn't stop fighting about the same issues over and over again. The problem wasn't the people, or the market, or even the terms themselves. The problem was that they'd built an inherently unstable arrangement, one where each side's best move was to constantly push for better terms, creating an endless cycle of renegotiation and resentment. They were trapped in a system that rewarded instability. Smart strategists think differently. They don't just win individual battles, they design games where winning becomes automatic. They create arrangements so stable that no one wants to change them, so balanced that everyone's best move is to keep playing by the current rules. They turn temporary tactics into permanent advantages. This chapter isn't about finding fair solutions. It's about finding stable ones, because stability is the ultimate leverage. When the game stops changing, you can focus on winning it. The leverage of permanence. Most business relationships are exhausting because they're constantly in flux. Partners renegotiate terms every quarter. Vendors probe for better deals every renewal. Employees angle for promotions and raises every review cycle. Customers shop around every contract period. The result is endless firefighting instead of forward progress. This instability isn't just annoying, it's expensive. Every renegotiation consumes time, attention, and political capital. Every dispute creates friction that slows execution. Every threat to change terms forces you to develop backup plans and alternative relationships. You spend more energy maintaining existing arrangements than building new ones. But flip the script and something powerful happens. When relationships become genuinely stable, when all parties prefer the current arrangement to any realistic alternative, you gain enormous leverage. You can invest in long-term improvements because you know the relationship will last. You can make commitments because you trust the other side won't abandon them. You can focus on execution because you're not constantly defending your position. The key insight is that stability isn't about finding perfect solutions. It's about finding solutions where no one wants to deviate unilaterally. Each party might prefer a different arrangement if they could redesign everything from scratch. But given the current situation and the costs of change, everyone's best move is to stick with what exists. This creates a powerful form of strategic lock-in. Once you achieve genuine stability, changing the arrangement requires coordinated action from multiple parties. Since coordination is difficult and risky, stable arrangements tend to persist even when better alternatives exist in theory. The status quo becomes self-reinforcing. The mathematics of mutual interest. Stability emerges from a simple mathematical principle: mutual best responses. When your best move given their likely action is compatible with their best move given your likely action, you've found an equilibrium point. Neither side benefits from changing strategy unilaterally, so both sides stick with the current approach. This sounds abstract, but it's intensely practical. Consider a simple vendor relationship. You want reliable service at reasonable prices. They want predictable revenue with manageable risk. If you commit to long-term contracts in exchange for price stability, and they commit to service guarantees in exchange for volume certainty, you've created mutual best responses. Your best move is to honor the contract because it gives you price predictability. Their best move is to deliver excellent service because it protects their revenue stream. The beauty of this approach is that it aligns incentives instead of fighting them. Instead of trying to force behavior through threats or monitoring, you design situations where everyone's self-interest points in the same direction. People do what you want them to do because it's what they want to do. Finding these mutual best response points requires thinking systematically about incentives. You map out each party's key objectives, constraints, and alternatives. You identify moves that serve multiple objectives simultaneously. You look for arrangements where helping the other party achieve their goals also helps you achieve yours. The process often reveals hidden opportunities for value creation. Maybe the vendor values payment speed more than you value payment delay, creating room for win-win terms. Maybe you value service consistency more than they value service flexibility, creating another alignment opportunity. Maybe both sides value simplicity more than optimization, suggesting streamlined arrangements that benefit everyone. The credibility imperative. Stability requires more than good intentions. It requires credible commitments. Promises are cheap, but credible promises are valuable because they actually change behavior. The difference between the two often determines whether arrangements hold together under pressure. A credible commitment is one you'll actually follow through on because it's in your interest to do so when the time comes. An incredible commitment is one you might abandon if circumstances change or better alternatives appear. Smart players distinguish between these carefully because incredible commitments create instability even when they're well-intentioned. Consider the classic problem of threats and promises in sequential interactions. You threaten to walk away if the other side doesn't meet your terms, hoping to improve your negotiating position. But if walking away would actually hurt you more than accepting their offer, your threat isn't credible. They know you won't follow through, so the threat doesn't change their behavior. The solution is to make your commitments self-enforcing. Instead of threatening to walk away, you create situations where walking away would actually benefit you if they don't meet your terms. Instead of promising to deliver excellent service, you create systems where delivering excellent service is the easiest and most profitable option for you. This often requires changing the structure of interactions, not just the terms. You might escrow payments to make your financial commitments credible. You might invest in relationship-specific assets to make your partnership commitments credible. You might create monitoring systems that make your quality commitments credible. The goal is to align your incentives with your promises so that keeping your word becomes automatic. The focal point advantage. When multiple stable arrangements are possible, the one that gets chosen often depends on focal points, solutions that seem obvious, natural, or salient to all parties. Focal points have enormous power because they solve the coordination problem that prevents groups from reaching stable agreements. Think about simple coordination challenges. When two people are trying to meet in a large city without being able to communicate, they often end up at obvious landmarks like train stations or city centers. These locations aren't necessarily optimal, but they're focal. Everyone thinks of them first, so everyone expects everyone else to think of them first. The same principle applies to business arrangements. When multiple deal structures could work, parties often gravitate toward round numbers, standard industry terms, or arrangements that mirror successful precedents. These focal solutions aren't necessarily the best possible outcomes, but they're stable because everyone recognizes them as reasonable defaults. Smart strategists learn to create focal points that favor their interests. They propose terms that seem natural and obvious, but actually tilt the stable outcome in their direction. They reference industry standards that happen to align with their preferences. They suggest precedents from successful arrangements they've designed. The key is making your preferred solution feel inevitable rather than imposed. When people feel like they're choosing the obvious answer rather than accepting your demands, they're more likely to commit fully to the arrangement. They're also less likely to revisit the terms later because the solution feels like a natural equilibrium rather than a negotiated compromise. This requires understanding what feels focal to your counterparts. Different industries, cultures, and personality types gravitate toward different types of solutions. Some prefer mathematical precision, others prefer rough approximations. Some prefer complex arrangements that account for every contingency, others prefer simple frameworks that handle most cases. Effective focal points match the mental models of the people who need to accept them. The dynamics of convergence. Not all interactions start in stable configurations. Many begin with misaligned incentives, conflicting objectives, or unclear expectations. The art lies in nudging these messy situations toward stability through a series of small adjustments that improve outcomes for everyone involved. This process works through best response dynamics. Each party makes small improvements to their strategy based on what the other party is currently doing. If both parties are making rational adjustments, these local improvements often converge towards stable arrangements where further adjustments don't help anyone. The key is ensuring that the adjustment process moves in the right direction. Sometimes local improvements lead away from global stability. Sometimes parties get stuck in cycles where each side's best response to the other's best response recreates the original problem. Sometimes the adjustment process is so slow that external conditions change before stability is reached. Successful convergence requires patience and strategic thinking. You need to make moves that improve your position while also making it easier for the other party to make moves that improve theirs. You need to signal your intentions clearly so they can adjust their strategy accordingly. You need to avoid moves that trigger defensive reactions that derail the convergence process. This often means accepting short-term, suboptimal outcomes in exchange for long-term stability. You might concede on issues that matter less to you but more to them, expecting reciprocal concessions on issues that matter more to you but less to them. You might invest in relationship-building activities that don't pay off immediately but create the trust necessary for stable arrangements. The monitoring challenge. Even stable arrangements require some monitoring to ensure they remain stable as conditions change. Markets shift, personnel change, priorities evolve, and external pressures create new incentives that can destabilize previously stable relationships. The challenge is designing monitoring systems that detect problems early without creating the surveillance and mistrust that undermine stability. Heavy-handed monitoring signals that you don't trust the other party to honor their commitments, which often becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Light-touch monitoring might miss important changes until it's too late to address them smoothly. The solution is to focus monitoring on leading indicators rather than lagging indicators. Instead of checking whether people are following the rules, you monitor whether the conditions that make rule following attractive are still in place. Instead of tracking compliance, you track satisfaction and alignment. This approach catches problems before they become crises. If monitoring reveals that one party's incentives are shifting in ways that threaten stability, you can adjust the arrangement proactively rather than waiting for violations to occur. If external conditions are creating new pressures, you can adapt the relationship structure before those pressures force unilateral changes. The monitoring itself should be mutual and transparent. Both parties should have visibility into the metrics that matter for relationship health. Both parties should participate in regular reviews that assess whether the arrangement is still serving everyone's interests. Both parties should have input into adjustments that maintain stability while adapting to changing conditions. The compound effect. Master the art of creating stable arrangements, and you gain a massive advantage that compounds over time. Each stable relationship frees up attention and resources that can be invested in building new relationships or improving existing ones. Each successful arrangement becomes a template for future arrangements. Each reputation for creating stability makes future negotiations easier and more productive. The compound effect shows up in multiple ways. Stable vendor relationships reduce procurement costs and improve service quality. Stable partnerships enable longer-term planning and deeper integration. Stable employment relationships reduce turnover costs and improve team performance. Stable customer relationships increase lifetime value and reduce acquisition costs. Your reputation evolves too. People start describing you as someone who creates arrangements that work for everyone, who thinks beyond immediate transactions to long-term relationships, who can be trusted to honor commitments even when circumstances change. This reputation becomes a competitive advantage that's difficult for rivals to replicate. But stability is just the foundation for the next level of strategic thinking. Once you've created arrangements that don't require constant attention, you can focus on the more subtle art of continuous improvement, learning faster than your competitors while maintaining the stability that makes learning possible. That's where the next chapter takes us, into territory where adaptation becomes automatic and improvement becomes inevitable. Chapter 7, Learn Fast. The casino was losing money to a single player, not through luck or cheating, but through something far more dangerous, systematic learning. While other gamblers chased hot streaks and lucky numbers, this player was running a quiet experiment, small bets, careful tracking, pattern recognition. Within 6 months, they'd identified a subtle bias in one roulette wheel that the casino hadn't noticed in 3 years of operation. The casino's response was swift and brutal. They banned the player and replaced the wheel. But the damage was done. Someone had demonstrated that even in games designed to be unbeatable, systematic learning could create an edge. The house always wins, except when someone learns faster than the house adapts. This is the power of learning while earning. Not the dramatic breakthrough moments that make headlines, but the quiet accumulation of small advantages that compound into unstoppable momentum. Most business owners treat learning and earning as separate activities. They pause operations to gather data, then pause learning to execute strategies. Winners do both simultaneously. The secret isn't working harder or being smarter. It's building a system that gets smarter while you work. The decay principle. Every strategy has an expiration date. What works today stops working tomorrow as competitors adapt, markets shift, and conditions change. The half-life of competitive advantage keeps shrinking across industries. Yesterday's breakthrough becomes today's standard practice, becomes tomorrow's obsolete approach. Most business owners respond to this reality by trying to build strategies that last longer. They invest in deeper moats, stronger patents, more exclusive partnerships. They're fighting the wrong battle. The goal isn't to make strategies permanent, it's to make learning permanent so you can replace strategies before they decay. This requires a fundamental mindset shift. Instead of asking, how can I make this strategy work forever? You ask, how can I learn what's working now and what's likely to work next? Instead of optimizing for durability, you optimize for adaptability. Instead of building walls to protect your current approach, you build sensors to detect when it's time to change. The companies that dominate their industries aren't those with the best initial strategies. They're those with the best learning systems. Amazon didn't start with the perfect e-commerce model. They built systems to test and improve continuously. Google didn't launch with the ideal search algorithm. They created processes to evolve it constantly. Netflix didn't begin with the optimal content strategy. They developed capabilities to adapt as viewing habits changed. The pattern is consistent. Sustainable advantage comes from learning faster than competitors, not from having better starting positions. This creates a powerful form of compound interest where each learning cycle makes the next cycle more effective. You don't just get better results, you get better at getting better results. The exploration engine. The core challenge of learning while earning is the exploration-exploitation trade-off. You need to allocate resources between testing new approaches and maximizing returns from current approaches. Explore too much, and you sacrifice short-term performance. Explore too little, and you miss opportunities for long-term improvement. Most organizations handle this trade-off poorly. They either explore randomly without systematic learning, or they exploit current strategies until they stop working. Both approaches are expensive. Random exploration wastes resources on low-probability experiments. Pure exploitation leaves you vulnerable to sudden strategy obsolescence. The solution is systematic exploration with built-in learning mechanisms. You allocate a fixed percentage of resources to testing alternatives while using the majority to execute your current best approach. The exploration budget is protected. It doesn't get cut when times are tough or redirected when current strategies are working well. This creates a sustainable learning rhythm. You're always testing new approaches, but you're not betting the company on unproven ideas. You're always improving your current approach, but you're not ignoring potentially better alternatives. You maintain performance while building the knowledge base for future performance improvements. The key insight is that exploration itself can be optimized. Instead of testing random alternatives, you test the most promising alternatives based on current knowledge. Instead of running isolated experiments, you run connected experiments that build on each other. Instead of treating exploration as a cost, you treat it as an investment in future competitive advantage. The regret minimization framework. Traditional performance measurement focuses on absolute results. Did you hit your targets, beat your competitors, achieve your goals? This approach misses a crucial dimension. How well did you perform relative to what was possible, given the information available? Regret minimization flips the script. Instead of asking, did we do well, you ask, how much better could we have done if we'd made optimal decisions with perfect hindsight? This reveals the true cost of imperfect learning and creates incentives for systematic improvement. Consider a simple example. You're testing 3 pricing strategies over 12 months. Strategy A generates 100 units of profit, strategy B generates 120 units, and strategy C generates 80 units. Traditional analysis says strategy B won. Regret analysis asks, what would have happened if you'd identified strategy B as the winner after 3 months and allocated all remaining resources to it? If you'd learned faster, you might have generated 140 units of profit instead of 100. The 40-unit difference is your regret, the cost of slow learning. This metric creates powerful incentives for improving learning speed and accuracy. It also reveals whether your exploration budget is too high, too low, or poorly allocated. Regret minimization also handles the noise problem that plagues most learning systems. Short-term results are often misleading due to random fluctuations, seasonal effects, or temporary market conditions. By tracking cumulative regret over longer periods, you can distinguish between genuine performance differences and statistical noise. This framework transforms learning from an art into a science. You can measure learning effectiveness, compare different learning approaches, and optimize your exploration strategies based on data rather than intuition. You can also identify when you're learning fast enough to justify current exploration levels versus when you need to increase or decrease exploration intensity. The human factor. Real opponents aren't perfectly rational machines. They're humans with biases, emotions, and inconsistent decision-making patterns. This creates both opportunities and challenges for learning systems. You can exploit predictable irrationalities, but you also need to avoid overfitting to temporary behavioral patterns. The key insight is that humans make better choices more often than worse choices, but not always. They respond to incentives, but with noise. They learn and adapt, but slowly and imperfectly. This suggests a different approach to competitive learning than what works against purely rational opponents. Against rational opponents, you'd focus on finding unexploitable strategies that can't be countered effectively. Against human opponents, you can often find exploitable strategies that take advantage of common cognitive biases and behavioral patterns. The challenge is distinguishing between stable human tendencies that can be exploited consistently and temporary patterns that will disappear once opponents adapt. This requires building behavioral models of your key competitors, partners, and customers. You track not just what they do, but how they make decisions, how quickly they adapt to changes, and what biases influence their choices. You look for patterns that persist across different contexts and time periods. The most valuable insights often come from understanding decision-making processes rather than just decision outcomes. If you know that a competitor always takes 3 months to respond to pricing changes, you can time your moves to maximize the window before they counter. If you know that a customer always anchors on the first price they see, you can structure your proposals accordingly. The batch discipline. The biggest enemy of effective learning is impatience. Most people want to peek at results constantly, adjust strategies based on early data, and chase every promising signal immediately. This destroys the statistical power that makes learning possible and creates thrashing that prevents any strategy from getting a fair test. Batch discipline solves this problem by pre-committing to fixed testing periods and sample sizes. You decide in advance how long each test will run, how many observations you need for reliable conclusions, and what criteria will trigger strategy changes. Then you stick to the plan regardless of what early results suggest. This approach feels unnatural because it requires ignoring information that seems relevant. If a new strategy is clearly outperforming after just a few trials, every instinct says to switch immediately. If a current strategy starts underperforming, every instinct says to abandon it quickly. Batch discipline demands that you resist these instincts in service of more reliable learning. The payoff is enormous. Batch discipline prevents you from chasing noise, reduces the risk of false discoveries, and ensures that winning strategies get enough testing to prove their superiority. It also creates the statistical power necessary to detect small but meaningful performance differences that might be invisible in small samples. The key is choosing appropriate batch sizes for different types of decisions. High-stakes, irreversible decisions need larger batches and longer testing periods. Low-stakes, reversible decisions can use smaller batches and shorter periods. The goal is to balance learning speed with learning reliability based on the importance and reversibility of each decision. The context capture system. Learning systems fail when they ignore context. A strategy that works in Q4 might fail in Q1. An approach that succeeds with enterprise customers might flop with small businesses. A tactic that dominates in growth markets might backfire in mature markets. Without capturing context, you can't distinguish between universal insights and situational insights. Context capture requires systematic logging of environmental conditions, competitive dynamics, and market characteristics during each learning cycle. You track not just what happened, but what was happening around it. You note seasonal factors, competitive moves, regulatory changes, economic conditions, and any other variables that might influence results. This creates a rich database that enables more sophisticated learning over time. Instead of just knowing that strategy X outperformed strategy Y, you know that strategy X outperformed strategy Y in competitive markets with price-sensitive customers during economic downturns. This specificity makes future strategy selection much more accurate. Context capture also prevents the survivorship bias that distorts many learning systems. When strategies fail, people often forget the context that caused the failure and avoid those strategies in all future contexts. When strategies succeed, people often forget the context that enabled success and try to apply those strategies in inappropriate contexts. The goal isn't to capture every possible contextual variable. That would create analysis paralysis. The goal is to capture the contextual variables that most influence strategy effectiveness in your specific situation. This requires some upfront thinking about what factors are likely to matter, but the investment pays off quickly in improved learning accuracy. The compound learning effect. Master the art of learning while earning, and you create a competitive advantage that's almost impossible to replicate. Each learning cycle makes you slightly better at choosing strategies, timing moves, and reading opponents. Each improved decision makes future learning more effective. Each competitive edge creates more resources to invest in further learning. This compound effect accelerates over time. Early learning cycles might produce small improvements that barely register in quarterly results. Later cycles produce breakthrough insights that transform entire business models. The key is maintaining consistency through the early phases when progress feels slow and benefits seem marginal. Your reputation evolves too. Customers start describing you as someone who always seems to be ahead of trends. Competitors start trying to copy your moves instead of innovating independently. Partners start seeking you out because working with fast learners accelerates their own progress. But learning fast is just the foundation for the ultimate strategic skill. Once you've built systems that adapt automatically to changing conditions, you can focus on the art of timing. Knowing when to defend your position and when to press your advantage, when to play it safe, and when to go for the kill. That's where the next chapter takes us, into the realm where patience and aggression dance together in perfect harmony. Chapter 8, Edge Switch. The hedge fund manager watched the market data scroll across his screens, finger hovering over the execute button. For 3 months, he'd been playing defense, small positions, tight stops, maximum diversification. His returns were steady but unspectacular. Now the data was screaming opportunity. Volatility had dropped, his models showed clear edge, and competitors were making predictable mistakes. But here's what separated him from the amateurs. He didn't just see the opportunity. He had a system for deciding when to act on it. Specific triggers that told him when his defensive foundation was solid enough to support aggressive offense. Pre-written scripts that defined exactly how he'd exploit the edge once he found it. Stop-loss rules that would pull him back to defense if conditions changed. He wasn't gambling on intuition. He was switching modes based on mathematics. And that switch from protect to exploit and back again was where the real money lived. Most business owners are stuck in one gear. They're either permanently defensive, playing not to lose, or permanently aggressive, pressing for advantage regardless of circumstances. Both approaches leave money on the table. The defensive players miss opportunities when conditions favor offense. The aggressive players get crushed when conditions favor defense. Winners switch. They know when to lock down and when to press forward. They know when to play it safe and when to go for the kill. Most importantly, they know how to make these decisions systematically, without emotion, based on clear triggers that remove ego from the equation. The two-mode reality. Every strategic situation offers two fundamental approaches: protect your position or exploit your advantages. You can't do both simultaneously with maximum effectiveness because they require different resource allocations, different risk tolerances, and different time horizons. The art lies in choosing the right mode for current conditions and switching cleanly when conditions change. Protect mode prioritizes security over growth. You focus on minimizing downside risk, maintaining stable cash flows, and preserving optionality for future opportunities. You use the guardrails from Chapter 4, the mixed strategies from Chapter 3, and the stability principles from Chapter 6. You're building a foundation that can weather storms and survive unexpected shocks. Exploit mode prioritizes growth over security. You focus on maximizing upside potential, pressing temporary advantages, and capitalizing on competitor mistakes. You use the opponent reading skills from Chapter 5, the learning systems from Chapter 7, and aggressive tactics tailored to specific situations. You're harvesting opportunities while they exist. The key insight is that both modes are necessary, but the timing of switches determines success. Switch to exploit too early, and you'll get crushed when your foundation isn't solid enough to support aggressive moves. Switch too late, and you'll miss opportunities that could have transformed your position. Stay in one mode too long, and you'll either stagnate from overcaution or collapse from overaggression. This creates a natural rhythm for strategic thinking. You build security first, then exploit from that secure base, then return to security to consolidate gains and prepare for the next opportunity. Each cycle should leave you in a stronger position than the previous cycle, creating a ratchet effect that compounds advantages over time. The frontier diagnostic. The relationship between security and exploitation isn't random. It follows predictable patterns that can be mapped and measured. As you push harder for exploitation, your security typically decreases because you're taking more risks, revealing more information, and committing more resources to uncertain outcomes. The question is whether the trade-off is worth it. Think of this as a frontier between two objectives. On one axis, you have security, how well protected you are against downside risks and competitor attacks. On the other axis, you have exploitation, how effectively you're capitalizing on current opportunities and advantages. Most strategies involve trade-offs between these objectives. The frontier helps you visualize your current position and identify improvement opportunities. If you're in the low security, low exploitation quadrant, you're getting the worst of both worlds, taking risks without capturing rewards. If you're in the high security, low exploitation quadrant, you're playing it too safe and missing opportunities. If you're in the low security, high exploitation quadrant, you're vulnerable to counterattacks that could wipe out your gains. The goal is to move toward the high security, high exploitation quadrant when possible, but more importantly, to choose the right point on the frontier for current conditions. Sometimes, maximum security is worth sacrificing exploitation opportunities. Sometimes maximum exploitation is worth accepting security risks. The key is making these trade-offs consciously rather than accidentally. This diagnostic also reveals whether you're ready to switch modes. If your security is high and exploitation is low, you might be ready to shift toward exploit mode. If your exploitation is high but security is dropping, you might need to shift toward protect mode. The frontier makes these decisions visible and systematic rather than intuitive and emotional. The trigger system. The biggest mistake in mode switching is relying on gut feelings to determine when to change approaches. Emotions are terrible guides for strategic timing because they're influenced by recent events, personal biases, and social pressures rather than objective conditions. The solution is pre-committed triggers that remove emotion from switching decisions. Triggers work because they force you to define switching criteria when you're calm and rational, before the pressure of real-time decisions clouds your judgment. They also prevent the most common switching errors, switching too late because you're emotionally attached to your current approach, or switching too early because you're reacting to noise rather than signals. The trigger system requires two sets of criteria: conditions that signal it's time to switch from protect to exploit, and conditions that signal it's time to switch from exploit back to protect. Both sets should be specific, measurable, and based on leading indicators rather than lagging results. Switch to exploit triggers might include low volatility in your key metrics, evidence that competitors are making predictable mistakes, or clear signals that your defensive foundation is solid enough to support aggressive moves. The key is ensuring that you're switching from a position of strength rather than desperation. Switch to protect triggers might include rising volatility, evidence that competitors are adapting to your tactics, or early warning signs that your aggressive moves are creating vulnerabilities. The key is switching before problems become crises, while you still have time to rebuild your defensive position. The triggers should be written down, shared with your team, and reviewed regularly to ensure they're still relevant as conditions change. They should also include specific actions you'll take once triggered, not just general intentions to be more defensive or be more aggressive. The execution protocol. Having the right triggers is worthless if you can't execute the switches cleanly and quickly. Mode switching requires more than just changing your strategy. It requires changing your resource allocation, your risk tolerance, your communication style, and your decision-making processes. This coordination challenge is where most switching attempts fail. The solution is pre-written scripts that define exactly how you'll operate in each mode. The protect script specifies which activities get priority, which risks are acceptable, which metrics you'll track most closely, and which decisions require additional approval. The exploit script specifies which opportunities you'll pursue, which risks you'll accept, which resources you'll deploy, and which timelines you'll follow. These scripts serve multiple purposes. They ensure that mode switches are comprehensive rather than partial. They reduce the cognitive load of switching by providing clear guidance for new situations. They align your team around the new approach by making expectations explicit. They create accountability by defining success criteria for each mode. The scripts should be specific enough to guide daily decisions, but flexible enough to adapt to different situations. They're frameworks for thinking, not rigid rules that eliminate judgment. The goal is to make switching faster and more consistent, not to automate strategic thinking entirely. Execution also requires clear communication about mode switches to your team, partners, and stakeholders. People need to understand why you're changing approaches, what the new approach entails, and how it affects their roles and responsibilities. Without this communication, mode switches create confusion and resistance that undermine their effectiveness. The timing mastery. The ultimate skill in mode switching is timing, knowing not just when to switch, but how to sequence switches for maximum advantage. Great players don't just react to conditions, they anticipate condition changes and position themselves to benefit from them. They switch slightly ahead of the curve rather than slightly behind it. This requires understanding the cycles and patterns that drive your industry, your competitors, and your customers. Some patterns are seasonal. Certain times of year favor defensive or aggressive approaches. Some patterns are competitive. Rivals tend to respond to your moves in predictable ways with predictable timing. Some patterns are internal. Your organization performs better in certain modes during certain phases of growth or stress. Timing mastery also involves understanding the lag effects of mode switches. Switching from protect to exploit doesn't create immediate results. It takes time for aggressive moves to generate returns. Switching from exploit to protect doesn't create immediate safety. It takes time for defensive measures to reduce vulnerabilities. These lags mean you need to switch before conditions demand it, not after. The most sophisticated players learn to use their switching as a competitive weapon. They switch modes at times that force competitors into uncomfortable positions. They exploit when rivals are defensive and defend when rivals are aggressive. They create tempo that others struggle to match, forcing reactive rather than proactive responses. This temporal advantage compounds over time. Each well-timed switch improves your position relative to competitors who switch poorly or don't switch at all. Each successful cycle builds the resources and reputation that make future switches more effective. Each demonstration of switching mastery makes competitors more hesitant to challenge you directly. The compound advantage. Master the art of switching between protect and exploit modes, and you create a competitive advantage that's almost impossible to replicate. While competitors are stuck in single modes, you're optimizing for changing conditions. While they're fighting the last war, you're preparing for the next one. While they're reacting to your moves, you're setting the tempo they have to follow. This advantage shows up in multiple ways. Your financial results become more stable because you're not fully exposed to any single approach. Your strategic options expand because you're not locked into any single mode. Your team becomes more adaptable because they're experienced in multiple operating styles. Your reputation evolves from predictable to sophisticated. The switching capability also creates optionality that has independent value. Knowing that you can shift modes effectively makes you more willing to commit to aggressive strategies because you know you can retreat if necessary. It also makes you more willing to invest in defensive capabilities because you know you can leverage them for offensive purposes later. But switching mastery is just the penultimate skill in the strategic hierarchy. The ultimate mastery comes from integrating all these capabilities: floors and mixed play, opponent reading and stability creation, learning systems and mode switching, into a coherent operating system that runs automatically, freeing your attention for the highest leverage decisions. That's where the final chapter takes us, into the realm where strategy becomes second nature and winning becomes inevitable. Chapter 9. Keep winning. The chess grandmaster made her final move and leaned back in her chair. Across the board, her opponent, a computer program that had defeated every other human challenger, calculated for 37 seconds before resigning. The crowd erupted, but she remained calm. This wasn't luck or inspiration. This was the culmination of a systematic approach she'd spent decades perfecting. She didn't win because she calculated deeper than the machine. She won because she'd built something the machine couldn't replicate, an operating system for sustained excellence, floors that prevented catastrophic mistakes, mixed strategies that made her unreadable, opponent models that revealed the machine's subtle biases, learning loops that improved her play faster than the programmers could patch the software. Most importantly, she'd automated the decision-making process itself. While the machine spent processing power on individual calculations, she spent it on meta-calculations, deciding which type of position to steer toward, which mode to play in, which patterns to exploit. She wasn't just playing chess, she was designing the game she wanted to play. This is what mastery looks like. Not perfect execution of individual tactics, but perfect integration of systematic principles. Not winning through superior effort, but winning through superior architecture. Not reacting to whatever game others want to play, but creating the conditions where your strengths become decisive. You now have that same architecture. the strategic stack. Over 8 chapters, you've built a complete strategic operating system. Each layer builds on the previous ones, creating a compound advantage that's greater than the sum of its parts. Let's see how they integrate into something unstoppable. The foundation is your security layer, the floors, guardrails, and risk management principles from Chapter 4. These aren't defensive tools that limit your upside, they're offensive enablers that make aggression possible. When you know your minimum acceptable outcome, you can press for maximum possible outcome. When failure becomes survivable, success becomes inevitable. The second layer is your unpredictability engine, the mixed strategies and structured randomness from Chapter 3. This isn't chaos for its own sake. It's systematic unreadability that prevents opponents from developing effective counters. While they waste resources trying to decode patterns that change by design, you're gathering intelligence about their patterns. The third layer is your intelligence system, the opponent modeling and mind-reading capabilities from Chapter 5. You're not just playing abstract games against theoretical opponents. You're playing specific people with specific biases, specific sophistication levels, and specific objectives. This precision targeting multiplies the effectiveness of every other tool in your arsenal. The fourth layer is your stability engine, the equilibrium thinking and credible commitment principles from Chapter 6. You're not just winning individual interactions, you're designing arrangements that stay one. You're creating situations where everyone's best move is to keep playing by rules that favor you. The fifth layer is your learning system, the exploration-exploitation balance and regret minimization from Chapter 7. You're not just executing current strategies, you're continuously discovering better strategies while maintaining performance. You're getting better at getting better, creating a compound advantage that accelerates over time. The sixth layer is your switching mechanism, the protect or exploit decision framework from Chapter 8. You're not locked into any single approach. You can shift between defensive and offensive modes based on conditions, not emotions. You can time your aggression for maximum impact and your caution for maximum protection. Each layer amplifies the others. Your floors make mixed play safer. Your mixed play makes opponent reading more valuable. Your opponent reading makes stability creation more precise. Your stability creation makes learning more efficient. Your learning makes switching more accurate. Your switching makes floors more effective. The result is an integrated system that's simultaneously robust and adaptive, secure and aggressive, systematic and flexible. It's an operating system for sustained competitive advantage. The confidence transformation. The most immediate change you'll notice isn't in your results, it's in your mindset. When you have systematic answers to strategic questions, confidence replaces anxiety. When you have clear frameworks for decision-making, calm replaces chaos. When you have proven tools for every situation, certainty replaces guesswork. This confidence isn't arrogance or overconfidence. It's the quiet assurance that comes from preparation. You know you can handle whatever situations arise because you have systematic approaches for handling them. You know you can adapt to changing conditions because you have learning systems that detect changes early. You know you can recover from setbacks because you have floors that prevent catastrophic losses. The confidence shows up in how you negotiate. You're not desperate for any particular deal because you know your walkaway point and you trust your ability to find alternatives. You're not afraid of aggressive opponents because you have tools for reading them and strategies for countering them. You're not paralyzed by complex situations because you have frameworks for simplifying them. The confidence shows up in how you compete. You're not reactive to competitor moves because you have your own agenda and your own timeline. You're not predictable in your responses because you have mixed strategies that keep opponents guessing. You're not vulnerable to sudden market shifts because you have learning systems that detect trends early. The confidence shows up in how you lead. Your team trusts your decision-making because it's systematic rather than impulsive. Your partners trust your commitments because they're credible rather than aspirational. Your stakeholders trust your judgment because it's based on frameworks rather than feelings. This transformation in confidence creates a positive feedback loop. Confident players attract better opportunities, negotiate better terms, and execute more effectively. Better results reinforce confidence, which attracts even better opportunities. The cycle compounds over time, creating momentum that becomes increasingly difficult for competitors to match. The relationship revolution. These strategic principles don't just improve your competitive position, they transform your relationships. When you operate from clear frameworks rather than emotional reactions, every interaction becomes more productive and less stressful. Your flaws create trust because people know what to expect from you. When you say you need certain terms to make a deal work, they believe you because you've demonstrated consistency in defending your requirements. When you commit to certain actions, they trust you'll follow through because your commitments are credible rather than aspirational. Your mixed strategies prevent exploitation without creating hostility. People can't take advantage of your predictability because you don't have predictable patterns. But they also don't feel manipulated because your unpredictability is systematic rather than deceptive. You're hard to exploit, but easy to work with. Your opponent modeling creates empathy because you understand what people really want and why they want it. Instead of fighting over positions, you can address underlying interests. Instead of assuming everyone thinks like you do, you can tailor your approach to their actual decision-making style. Your stability focus creates long-term value because you design arrangements that don't need constant renegotiation. People prefer working with you because relationships stay stable, terms stay clear, and surprises stay minimal. You become known as someone who creates solutions that stick. Your learning systems create continuous improvement because you're always finding better ways to serve everyone's interests. Relationships get better over time instead of deteriorating. Problems get solved permanently instead of recurring. Value gets created continuously instead of extracted once. Your switching capability creates reliability because people know you'll adapt to changing conditions rather than stubbornly sticking to approaches that no longer work. They trust that you'll be defensive when defense is needed and aggressive when aggression is appropriate. The combination creates a reputation for sophisticated partnership. People seek you out because working with you makes them more successful. They recommend you to others because you make them look good. They prioritize your requests because you make their lives easier. The performance promise. The systematic application of these principles produces measurable improvements in business performance. These aren't theoretical benefits. They're practical advantages you can track and optimize. In competitive bidding situations, you'll win 5 to 10% more deals at 5 to 10% better margins. Your floors prevent you from accepting unprofitable terms. Your mixed strategies prevent competitors from gaming your approach. Your opponent modeling helps you structure offers that address decision-makers' real priorities. Your stability focus creates proposals that feel safe and sustainable. In negotiation cycles, you'll close deals 10 to 15% faster, with 10 to 20% better terms. Your frameworks eliminate the back and forth that comes from unclear positions. Your credible commitments prevent the testing and probing that extends timelines. Your focal point creation guides parties toward obvious solutions. Your switching capability lets you press when conditions favor aggression and consolidate when conditions favor patience. In partnership development, you'll create arrangements that last longer and perform better. Your equilibrium thinking ensures that deals stay attractive to all parties as conditions change. Your learning systems identify and address problems before they become crises. Your reputation for sophisticated partnership attracts higher quality opportunities. In competitive positioning, you'll become harder to attack and more effective at attacking. Your mixed strategies eliminate the tells that competitors use to predict and counter your moves. Your learning systems help you adapt faster than rivals can respond. Your switching capability lets you exploit their rigidity while maintaining your own flexibility. The performance improvements compound over time. Each successful application of the principles builds reputation that makes future applications more effective. Each relationship that stays stable reduces the time and energy needed for relationship maintenance. Each competitive advantage that proves sustainable creates resources for building additional advantages. The automation effect. The ultimate payoff comes from automation, not technological automation, but cognitive automation. As these frameworks become habitual, they require less conscious attention and mental energy. Strategic thinking becomes as automatic as driving a familiar route. Your floor setting becomes instinctive. You automatically identify your minimum acceptable outcomes and defend them without emotional drama. You don't need to consciously calculate security levels. You feel when you're operating within safe parameters and when you're approaching dangerous territory. Your mixed play becomes natural. You automatically vary your approaches without thinking about it. You don't need to consciously randomize your strategies. You intuitively avoid the patterns that would make you predictable and exploitable. Your opponent reading becomes effortless. You automatically size up sophistication levels and motivational patterns. You don't need to consciously analyze every interaction. You quickly recognize familiar types and tailor your approach accordingly. Your stability creation becomes standard. You automatically design arrangements that align incentives and create mutual best responses. You don't need to consciously engineer equilibria. You naturally gravitate towards solutions that feel stable and sustainable. Your learning becomes continuous. You automatically gather intelligence and update your models. You don't need to consciously run experiments. You naturally test alternatives and promote winners. Your switching becomes fluid. You automatically adjust your mode based on conditions. You don't need to consciously evaluate triggers. You sense when it's time to shift from protection to exploitation and back again. This automation frees your conscious attention for higher-level strategic thinking. Instead of struggling with tactical decisions, you can focus on designing the games you want to play. Instead of reacting to competitor moves, you can set the agenda they have to respond to. Instead of optimizing individual interactions, you can architect entire competitive landscapes. The cognitive load reduction is enormous. Strategic decisions that once required hours of analysis now happen in minutes. Situations that once created stress and uncertainty now feel manageable and familiar. Challenges that once seemed overwhelming now feel like interesting puzzles with systematic solutions. Your first move. All of this theory is worthless without action. The gap between knowing and doing is where most strategic knowledge dies. The solution is to start small, start today, and start with something specific enough to complete in the next hour. Pick one live situation you're facing right now. A negotiation that's been dragging on, a competitive threat that's been worrying you, a partnership that's been unstable, a pricing decision that's been unclear. Choose something real, current, and important enough to matter. Draw a simple 2x2 grid. On one axis, put your possible moves. On the other axis, put their likely responses. Fill in the outcomes for each combination. This forces you to think systematically about the game you're actually playing instead of the game you wish you were playing. Set your floor. What's the minimum outcome you can accept and still consider the interaction successful? Write it down. Make it specific. This number becomes your non-negotiable anchor for everything that follows. Choose your mode. Are you in a position to exploit opportunities aggressively, or do you need to protect your position defensively? Base this decision on your current security level, not your emotional preferences. If your foundation is solid, consider exploit mode. If it's shaky, stick with protect mode. Design your approach. If you're in protect mode, focus on mixed strategies that prevent exploitation and floors that limit downside. If you're in exploit mode, focus on opponent-specific tactics that maximize your advantages. Either way, keep it simple enough to execute under pressure. Schedule a review. Put a 10-minute meeting with yourself on your calendar for immediately after the interaction. You'll assess what worked, what didn't, and what you learned. This closes the learning loop and ensures that each application of the principles improves your mastery of them. Execute. Take the action you've planned. Follow through on your commitments. Defend your floors. Stick to your strategy. Trust the system you've built. This single cycle, plan, execute, review, is the foundation of everything that follows. Each repetition builds skill, confidence, and results. Each success creates momentum for the next application. Each lesson learned improves future performance. The compound future. You're not just learning tactics for winning individual games. You're building capabilities for designing the games themselves. You're not just improving your performance in current markets. You're developing the skills to create new markets where your advantages become decisive. 6 months from now, these frameworks will feel natural. You'll automatically think in terms of floors and mixed strategies. You'll instinctively read opponent sophistication levels. You'll naturally design stable arrangements. You'll continuously learn and adapt. You'll fluidly switch between modes. 1 year from now, your reputation will have shifted. People will describe you as someone who thinks strategically, who can be trusted to honor commitments, who creates solutions that work for everyone. Competitors will be more cautious about challenging you directly. Partners will seek you out for complex deals. Customers will pay premium prices for the certainty you provide. 3 years from now, you'll be operating at a different level entirely. You'll be designing competitive landscapes rather than just competing within them. You'll be setting industry standards rather than just meeting them. You'll be creating value rather than just capturing it. You'll be teaching others rather than just learning yourself. The principles you've learned don't just improve your current situation, they transform your future possibilities. They don't just help you win the games you're playing, they help you choose which games to play. They don't just make you more effective, they make you more free. This is the ultimate payoff of strategic mastery. Not just better results, but better choices. Not just more success, but more control over the conditions that create success. Not just winning more often, but winning in ways that make future winning easier. You have the tools, you have the frameworks, you have the knowledge. The only question remaining is whether you'll use them. The game is waiting. Your move.